Welcome to Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, the podcast that gives you an unfiltered behind-the-scenes look at what it's really like being a woman in the middle who's over 50 and following her entrepreneurial dreams. Grab a superhero cape, girlfriend, because you deserve one. I'm your host, Master Certified Life Coach and Midlife Mentor, Susie Rosenstein, and I am excited to inspire you with interviews that feature all of this midlife amazingness. Let's go. Hi there. Welcome back to the show. We have a really exciting interview ahead of us about giving hope and joy to women over 50. Today, you'll be meeting Esta McIntyre, a woman in the middle entrepreneur who teaches science-based methods to help women over 50 to look great, hone their edge, and create endless energy so their later years are their best years. Welcome to the show, Esta. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me.
I know we're going to have a really fun conversation. I could just tell. All about your midlife entrepreneur story. We're going to be talking about your business, of course, and what's going really well, and also what midlife issues might be getting in your way to some extent and might be challenging you in life or perhaps as a business owner. So let's get this going. Start out by telling us a little bit how old you are, how long you've been an entrepreneur, and of course, what you do in the world. Take it away.
All right. Well, I'm 67 years old.
Woohoo!
I hardly believe that. And, for most of my life, I was a traditional corporate employee. I did the corporate thing. In fact, for the same company for 30 years in the same industry, completely different than what I do now. I was a information systems manager, and that's what I did. Marketing research, which has served me well, by the way, over the years.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, totally. And at some point in time, the challenge for me is that I am the product of two clinically obese parents. Oh. And so my whole life was spent in the battle. I know a lot of us have had the battle. I was 5 times in my adult life, up 65, down 65, up 65. It was crazy, right? 5 times. So the last time that happened to me, I did what any self-respecting woman would do. I went into the plastic surgeon's office and I said, I want you to suck it out because I didn't want to fight the battle anymore, And he said, I would do that, but you're too big. Now, you know that when you go into a surgeon's office and they can make thousands and thousands of dollars on you and they send you away, you kind of have a problem, right?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, right. So I thought, fine, I'll lose weight again, but I didn't want to do anything, I didn't want to take the long road. I wanted the path of least resistance. So at that time, there was a drug called Fen-Phen. Do you remember that? It's phentermine and fenfluramine. So it was, an upper and a downer, basically. And I thought it was a miracle drug until they took fenfluramine off the market because it was causing heart problems. And just to show you how crazy my mindset was, I thought, oh, it's a good thing I got to take it before they took it off the market. I didn't worry do I have heart problems? None of that. I just thought, I needed to take it.
Diet mentality is can do crazy things to you.
Nuts.
Wow.
I know. And so that's another story for a different day. And so the long and the short of it was I did get down using that drug enough to have some surgery. So I had some liposuction and a couple of other things lifted and scooted over and, all that stuff. But that was when I was 40 years old. Right. So, but I knew in my heart of hearts that was not my ticket. Now, I was still in corporate, high deadlines, high pressure, all of that at that time. And so I really I would have classified myself as sedentary. I was sitting at a desk meeting deadlines 24/7, but I did know that a drug was not my ticket. And so I thought, I probably should get some movement. And so I started exercising, and fast forward, I'm going to tell you how I got into doing what I do. I went to a local chiropractor who I don't even think is practicing any longer. And I just went on a weight loss program, just the usual. We've all of us, especially women, have grown up in this bubble of diet and exercise, like the battle.
Oh, women our age. Absolutely. I was talking about this a couple days ago. We had a I can't even remember when or where we were talking about it, but we had flashbacks to what our youth was when we were in high school.
Right.
Reading the magazines, putting on the oil for sun tanning, right? Do you
What a
remember
mess
that?
we made. Yes, I saw
Sun in your hair,
aluminum foil. Did you do the
aluminum
foil
foil,
thing?
and
Yeah.
all the crazy the diets that were recommended, like it. And I even remember my a transistor radio on those lounge chairs that were vinyl wrapped. Do you remember those?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And they left marks on your legs if you had short. I so remember.
that's it.
The crazy things. But I mean, at the time, that was the information of the day, right?
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
so this chiropractor knew someone who was trainer to the stars. And he said to me, he's a friend of mine. I've talked to him. He's going to give you some free sessions. And I grew up in the New York City housing projects. And with that mentality, I thought, well, if he's trainer to the stars, there's no way I can pay for it. He said he's going to give you a free session. And I said, fine. So I went, and his background was so fascinating to me because his undergrad degree was in exercise physiology, but his master's and doctorate in psychology. So when he was killing you physically, he was up in your head. So I knew he was different. Like I'd gone to a million different, I'm going to lovingly refer to them as cookie cutter trainers or cookie cutter fitness. So I knew he was different. And I said, I'm really interested in your services. Can you great? And he said, why don't you? And it just kept going on like that. And I thought I was evaluating him. But what I did not realize was that he was really evaluating. He was seeing it because he didn't want to take on anybody for whom he couldn't produce results. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So I'm going to roll this forward so we don't take too long. So I ended up taking advantage of his services, and he would only see me 2 times a week. And I had to join the local, very expensive tennis. Already, I was like, I had buyer's remorse the second I did it. And so the way I paid for him for 2 years is I ran to Ross and TJ Maxx and Marshalls, and I would see what was on sale on the sale racks, learn to sell it on eBay. If it didn't sell, I returned it. That's how I paid for that man for 2.5.
Oh,
Right?
and eBay was early. It was
early on.
Yes.
Because I've been in the industry now, in the fitness industry, the wellness industry for going on 20 years. So there you go. Right. So that was my foray into fitness, because one day he said to me, it is time for you to pay it forward. And I said, what? He said, pay it forward. So I went back to, I wasn't even sure if I could do it, if I had brain cells to do it. So yeah, so that's how I started.
Wow. And then how did that morph into the business you have now?
Well, I started off with a credential, because I was still working like very full time. And I thought, well, let me just see if I can even do this. So I started with friends, I started working with friends in my home, and then I got busy very quickly. And I found a little room in a chiropractic facility, still working full time. So we do it early in the morning and late at night. And this little room was about 175 square feet with a very low ceiling. So if I had somebody lifting overhead, like we had to remove a ceiling tile so they could.
So I guess you could only work with small clients. That would be the other thing.
You know what? But I stayed there another 2 years because I learned in that facility were chiropractors, acupuncturists, and I learned a lot from those people. And so that's how I started. And then I got my first facility, and it was during the days when we had that awful recession, but there were so many commercial spaces available for a song. So I took a space. I'm still working full time.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. And I guess one thing you didn't mention is the transformation you had working with that coach. So there must have been quite a transformation there.
I lost that weight. But I'm not going to lie and say that keeping it off has been like, a slam dunk.
Yeah.
None of us. And that's the reason why I work with the population I do in the way that I do, because we are each cut from a unique cloth, and each of us requires custom solutions. And I'm going to talk about that as I talk about what naturally occurs in aging populations. you
Well,
know?
let's talk a little bit about that now, because I know this is probably one of the reasons you're so excited to work with the 50 plus crowd.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were brought up, or at least I was, we had this set of rules, and most of us that have struggled with weight during our lifetime believe these rules. Remember back in the day, do you remember it used to be low fat, non-fat, kept the fat low? And I don't know how many bags of marshmallows I ate because I thought they were low fat the entire time, not realizing they were loaded with sugar. But at that time, that was considered an okay food because it was low fat. And so, it was a time when the rules kept changing, and that occurs even today. We don't know if we should do vegan, keto, ketovore, carnivore. No, So that's what I do with my clients, is take the pain of it away, because I do the research for them based on their body. So the whole, even for me today, it's a struggle. I would be lying if I'm very transparent with the people, that put their trust and faith in me, and they know exactly what I'm going through and how did I solve the problem?
Well, you're right that it can be overwhelming. There's lots of sources of information. Menopause throws a whole other wrench into things with confusion and hormones and misinformation and, seeking healthcare providers that aren't well versed. And, menopause is such a crazy time because it's kind of like no one talks about it. And I've noticed a difference in the last few years. There are many more menopause focused services and subspecialties and things like that. But when I went through menopause, it was much less. Fewer people were talking about it. And at least my physician did bring it up, my primary care physician. But yeah, it's crazy. So you help with the literacy, you help with the problem solving. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, absolutely. But let me speak to menopause, if I may, for 1 second. So, my generation, a whole generation of women were fearful of hormones, right? Because there was the nurses study that was done. I believe it was in the 70s. There were more studies done in the 90s, but these studies were done on Premarin and Prempro. They weren't done on bioidentical hormones. And I don't know if you know anything about those hormones, but they are from horses' urine. And we only
I do not know anything about these hormones.
So we only have 2 hormones in common with those. And there were cancer causing agents in some of those. And so there's a whole generation of women who didn't take hormones, not even bioidentical, because we had breast cancer in the family, or we were afraid of breast cancer. And so we kind of lost out. And one thing about me is I'm a biohacker, and I will try anything that I think won't kill me, so that I can say to my population, okay, I tried it. You might not want to do this because here's what happened to me. And I always do it together with a physician. Like I don't just go off on my own and do strange. So fairly recently, I never did hormones through menopause. It was a rocky road, and I flew around on a broom a lot, but I recently had a pellet implanted because I realized, oh my goodness. Okay. So even the founders of those studies retracted a lot of that information, but the traditional stay in your lane physicians, many of whom I love, they still report the same findings, which are not altogether true. Does that make sense? So,
not sure.
When I say, they still say hormones cause cancer.
Oh,
so that's a very broad statement. And so, I have found you have to find the practitioners that work with you, and it's so important.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of literacy is required, and comfort with asking questions.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you said in your notes is that you are not an anti-aging strategist, but rather a pro-aging strategist. Can you tell me a little bit about what you meant by that?
Well, first of all, I feel like anti-aging means that I don't want to get there, when the reverse is true.
We totally want to get there.
Right? So anti-aging means against aging. Well, that phrase came to be when it was all about not looking old or not looking. And it really was more about skincare back in the day, and skincare products. I don't necessarily, for me, aging is not necessarily about how you look. We all want to look good. We all want our skin to be good, but it's really about what's going on inside. So, but that's what I meant about pro-aging. I just feel like that phrase is just not fitting the way I feel about the aging.
Yeah. And
let me tell you, stuff happens to your body as you go through it.
Oh yeah. And some surprising things. And I mean, why just today I have a pimple at almost 60. I have a pimple. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Isn't that lovely, Esta? Right on my face. I used cover up just for you.
Thank you. Yeah. My husband and I, we laugh. We're married about 48 and a half years.
Wow.
And we laughed because, you sit on the sofa and I don't know, suddenly your thumb hurts and you think, well, gee, that didn't hurt yesterday. Why is my thumb hurting? And when you didn't do anything, so those are the kinds of transient aches and pains that happen. I'm doing a back thing right now because my back had a host of problems. And it's interesting because they want to, my community wants to know, how did that go? Because everybody has something. Once you have something and you're verbal about it, you find out that you're not alone.
Oh my gosh. That's why I love doing the podcast so much. And I think it's so important. And that's the most common feedback I get from listeners is thank you for talking about this. Now I know I'm not alone. You can't have anything where you're alone. Like, no, you're not alone. It's so unusual to get something really rare. Most of the stuff we deal with, we're in the best company. Now, one of the things I love talking about on this podcast is this weird intersection of midlife crap and us trying to run our businesses. So what midlife things, I call them classic midlife issues, everything from menopause and energy to empty nest to caring for older parents to having friends retire all around you and, time flying and worrying about having regrets, all these things. What are some of the midlife issues that are coming up for you?
Oh my God.
And are affecting the way you run your business?
Well, as a fitness professional,
yeah,
I think it ratchets things up a little bit because the expectation, especially for someone like me who speaks from stages, is that you're going to be a Barbie doll and you're going to look like a Barbie doll and you're going to have no issues, which is the antithesis of what life looks like. So I think the first and most important thing for all of us to do is to reverse engineer. Like I have to say, what's my end game, right? And as a business owner, those things change over time. So I decide what my time expenditure should look like to suit me. So as a person with a business, I have to we all have to decide how much time we want to put in, what we want to accomplish. And then the things that get in the way, I would say the most important thing is to give yourself some grace. When I was young, I was full speed ahead no matter what. And I don't know if you remember this, Susie, but back when I was a young career, professional, coming in with a sore throat and a hacking cough was a badge of honor.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And now it's like, oh my gosh, go home, which is a smart way to behave. But when I was young, we didn't give ourselves any grace. And I would say the most important thing in building a business at middle age or beyond is that you must give yourself some grace if you want to sustain.
For sure. I guess what you just said, though, about being a fitness professional is really interesting because if you're aware of those expectations, how are you managing the expectations? So, for example, if you have a speaking gig and you aren't feeling good about the way you look or the way that clothes are fitting or who knows what do you do? Do you make the changes? Do you work on your mindset? Do you go get another outfit? Like what are you?
You know what? It's a combination of all of those things. One of the most important things for me is that I'm real, right? So I'm not gonna tell you that I'm anything that I'm not. And so, I mean, I talk about the importance of not striving to be a Barbie doll. I talk about pain. I talk about me rowing in that same boat with them. The only difference is I'm doing the research 2 hours every day to try to keep that boat on the water. It's really about living your best life. So you got to know that there are days when I get on the stage and I think to myself, showtime on some level. So there's a gray area because I'm never going to be on a stage and tell them how badly I feel. That's not what they came to hear from me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So but the thing I'm going to do is go out, give my best, and then give myself some grace. Not everything is going to be perfect. I'm not perfect in every podcast. I'm not perfect on every stage. But one thing that people can always say about me is I do my very best and I give it my all. That's what I do. Can't do more than that, right?
And no, you can't. And what does giving yourself grace look like?
Sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that every wellness, fitness professional, scientist, doctor agrees. Sleep is number one.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm not going to say get rid of stress, but I'm going to say get a handle on the stress because those cortisol hormones are real. So so what it looks like for me is quiet time, and my quiet time looks very different every time I do. Like people say, do you meditate? Sometimes. Do you write? Sometimes. Do you journal? Sometimes. Sometimes I just sit there in a fog, but whatever it is, give yourself grace. Means sleep. Do what you want sometimes. And even if you're having to be really careful with your nutrition, throw caution to the wind every now and then. Like you can't be perfect all the time. We're humans.
Esta, thank you so much for sharing actually what grace looks like for you, because a lot of times in, self-development, personal development, coachy world, we use a lot of terms and don't really dig in. And I thought grace was one of those, right? So many of us will say grace.
Yes.
Actually say, no, I'm going to be intentional about sleep. What does that mean? What does it mean to actually have quiet time? And everybody would define that differently. And not everybody wants to meditate. And some of us can't read books anymore because then we're actually sitting down and instead of reading, we're falling asleep.
That's exactly right. Thank goodness for listening to books, right?
Agreed. I just finished a whole book that was, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 hours long, and I wasn't in the car until yesterday. The only audio books I'd ever finished in completion were on a car ride. And it was a highlight to do that on a big road trip. But yesterday I finished one that I'd been just listening to a little here and a little there, but more than a little so that I would remember what was going on. And it was fantastic. And I really felt grateful for being able to consume a book that way just yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, so the way I do the Audible books is that I listen to them. I have a little notepad. I do it while I'm doing my makeup, my hair, whatever. I have a little notepad there. And if there's something I really want to, make a note of, I just write it down on that pad so that I remember it. But also if that book is like amazing to me, then I'll go get the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then I want to highlight things, and most of what I listen to is research based. So it's about the science of aging.
So you'll definitely want sticky notes or some of those.
Or it's about regen medicine, because that's the way of the future. Regenerative medicine is where, mark my words, it's where medicine will go.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So one thing that's so common about the work that you do and the work that I do and anybody who works with women in the middle is that we don't put ourselves first. It's very challenging it's the way I finish the podcasts. I always say it's time to put yourself on your agenda. So how does that show up in the work that you do? And also, what do you catch yourself doing sometimes when you're not putting yourself first?
Is it a case of the pot calling the kettle black, right?
Just a little bit.
So I do a talk from stages. When I speak from stage, there are 3 topics that people get to choose from. And one of them is staying healthy on your $1 million journey, right? So I mean, I talk to these entrepreneurs, and believe it or not, the highest percentage of entrepreneurs now are women over 50. They're leaving corporate in droves and starting their own businesses. And that's the first thing I say. You know, we spend so much time serving friends, serving family, serving others, building our businesses, serving clients, that we don't spend any time on ourselves. And I'm going to tell you this from the bottom of my heart. The human body is forgiving. When you're younger, it's much more forgiving. But as we get older, it's less so. We don't heal as quickly. We don't get rid of aches and pains as quickly. And that's why it isn't just a suggestion. It is imperative to put yourself on the top of that list. Sounds so cliche, but you know, we can't feed the world from an empty plate, right?
Right.
So, and that's why find things that take away stress. I do that. You know, one of my things, I love music. If I can just set a timer for 10 minutes during my day, put on music I love. I won't mention her name because she's right behind me, but if I tell her to play a certain song or a certain station, I can dance for 10 minutes until that timer goes off. And that gives me joy.
Yes.
Find those things during the day, even if it's only for 10 minutes, that make your heart sing. That's what I would say. I mean, and I do it. I practice it.
That's great. That is a really good one. And what do you think? I'm sure this has happened to you. Have you noticed that being an older woman affects being an entrepreneur, or vice versa? Yeah. What are you noticing about that? Because women are really like becoming a serious force in this slice of business. But being an older woman, sometimes we notice things. So what comes up for you?
Well, I talk about this because you know how men age, you know, they get distinguished, gray at the temples, and they become, you know, more highly respected. And I think women get treated, it's not the case, but they get treated more like they're a piece of fruit that goes bad really quickly. You know, like I never believed that ageism existed. I always did what I wanted until I started in this industry. And I realized that the cultural norms that are associated with aging are so powerful, and we need to overcome those norms. And that means that as aging entrepreneurs, we need to lock on.
I agree. Now, when you started in this business, did you mean fitness or did you mean?
I meant fitness.
Yeah.
And I really started after 50. And it was a completely different. I mean, the one thing that served me well was I had been in business for so many years in research, and I understood marketing, but nevertheless, it still was I was a baby in this area that people had already been in for 30 years.
Right. And that is what commonly happens for women in their 50s, is that we become a beginner when we've been on top of our game for decades.
But, you know, I think experience is worth so much. You know,
Absolutely.
When you're first, you know, for the young ones that are coming into my industry, they have the strength and the technology behind them and the power, but we have years of experience, relationship experience, and we understand what the market was then and how to adjust for what it is now. I think experience is worth so much and is underrated.
Completely agree. And ways that you can translate that experience. So experience that, you know, may look a little different in a different industry, it still counts as experience, plus just being an older and wiser woman.
Right.
Stuff out for decades.
Right.
It counts.
I'm always interested, you know, how I'm going to say how life is designed, you know, like you tell your kids, you advise them in a certain way, and they're like, oh, I know what I'm doing. And I think about why I did that. I know what I'm doing. Right. And that is by design. You know, we all have to learn the way that we learn. And, you know, you pray that you can keep them alive, or that they, you know, they don't do anything. But it's the same way with us. You know, life is designed so that experience becomes your teacher. And I think that younger generations don't necessarily realize that, because when I was studying to put together the course that I wrote and the book, I researched millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers. I wanted to know the difference between the generations. And the deeper I got into it and more I read, I realized that millennials, generally speaking, millennials don't like boomers because they hold boomers responsible for all of the environmental ills of the world. And boomers think millennials are lazy and they do this.
Yeah.
They pass each other because they can't communicate.
Yeah.
But problem solving has to be multi-generational because they've got things we don't have and have things they don't.
Yeah, you're right. Transferable skills are just one thing that we have, but yeah, that's a really great point. So tell us a little bit about your book.
My book. So Fitness for Women Who Love to Eat and Hate to Move. That would be me, right? Every woman. And the first part of it, originally when I wrote the book, it was simply a calling card. I wanted people to understand my background, where I came from, and the fact that we are all so unique, and that we all cannot apply the same solution, and that nothing needs to be extreme, if that makes sense. And so I wrote the book with that in mind, and it's currently we're writing a second edition now, because when I wrote it, it was due to be released on March 20th, on March 2020. In March 2020. Well, guess what happened then? So I called the publisher and I said, I'm not sure what to do. Like, let's pull it back. Let me think about what to do. I had an opportunity to write the final chapter, which was on COVID and what happened in the business during COVID. Great. And then we released it. The book signing was hysterical because it was a outdoor book signing. So thankfully it was a U. So they came in one driveway and went out another. And I had an assistant who was out there taking their information, bringing it into me. I was signing the book. If I knew them, I went out of the door and waved. But you adapt, right?
Yeah. It was a crazy time.
Life is about adaptation. And it was my silver lining as well. So
in what way?
Oh my goodness. Well, I owned a gym in Los Angeles for 15 years. And when you own a gym in Los Angeles during COVID, well, let's just say that not everybody covets one during COVID, a gym that is. So, and my demographic is women 50 and older.
Yeah.
And so we found out the same day that we were closing, and we called I had the front desk call every person and say, have them bring their biggest vehicle. And we sent them home with trampolines, balls, bands, weights, anything in that gym that wasn't nailed down. I had 6 employees at the time, and we all taught from home. We streamed classes the next day. It was a hot mess. I didn't know anything about streaming classes. And anyway, we lasted the length of our lease, and the handwriting was on the wall. During that time, I wrote a 60 module, a very dense course on aging and what to do during the aging process. And the rest is history. The book became a bestseller. I wrote another collaborative book with some people that also became a bestseller, and off we went. So that was my silver lining. If it hadn't been for COVID, Susie, I would be in the same place doing the same thing. I loved it. It was my heart. Yeah. I cried my heart out,
Esta, I'm so glad you shared this, but you're right about, having the entrepreneurial spirit helps you seize an opportunity. Not everybody seized an opportunity in COVID. Some people did, but you saw it and you figured out a way that was just as exciting for you.
I feel like what you do should be your heart at this point in life.
Yeah.
It should be your heart. And the very thing that they were asking my demographic to stop doing, stay indoors, don't go anywhere, was the very thing they needed for survival.
Yeah.
Especially the movement part of it.
Indeed. And one of the things that it also helped you do, though, was to lean into, being a mentor as well.
Right.
As a teacher and a coach. And being a mentor is so fulfilling for women our age.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I just had a lot of good fortune, and none of it would have happened had it not been for COVID. I hate to say that, but I've been written up in magazines, but not if I had stayed in those four walls and left my blinders on and just stayed in that lane, nothing would have happened. So you have to have courage.
You have to have courage, and you have to have a mindset that's open to possibility, right?
Courage,
so for some reason, you were ready for possibility.
And I got a coach too. I went out and I thought, you know what? I need support during this time. I had no idea how to write a course. I had no idea that you had to have software to write a course. Like what? I had no idea.
All the stuff about online, it was so funny. I had been using Zoom and teaching and coaching online for a couple of years already. Oh. And I remember some of my friends were freaking because their never been online business was now, they were trying to figure it out. And I remember getting on Zoom with a friend and talking to her about lighting and audio. And she was a speech pathologist who never even imagined that this could be done online. I had the same experience with somebody who worked with dyslexia. So yeah, but you saw it as an opportunity, and that's the entrepreneurial mindset. And you saved yourself and you helped so many women along the way. So
I paid those employees through the end of the lease. I never stopped paying them. So I don't like to think about those years, but yet I have to be honest and say it was my silver lining and really gave me a kick in the derriere to change my thinking. Yep.
Grow forward. It was a time of growth. Yeah.
You fall forward, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I crawled for a while though.
So last question, what is like a really important point that you really want to get out about your experience or about your main message in your business?
I'm going to say, do not succumb to the cultural norms associated with aging. Don't succumb. Don't stop doing things because people think, oh, you're such and such an age. You shouldn't be doing that. Like, I'm not going to say what's on my mind. I'm not going to spew any words, but I'm just going to say, don't succumb. You know, we have a wardrobe specialist come on, and this whole notion of dress your age. Like, what the heck does that mean? Dress your age? Like, throw that out the window. Do what makes your heart sing. That would be my message.
That's so good. How can people best get in touch with you?
They can go to flourishafter50.com, and I will always do a free, no cost, no obligation consultation. If you go to contact me in that website, there is a calendar there. You can schedule book a time with me. And I'm just happy to chat with people. And it's because it's my mission and my heart,
I hear you loud and clear. Esta, what a delight. Thank you so much for taking the time from your day.
Oh,
to just be with
my
me.
honor.
And be with the women in the middle entrepreneurs and just be in my world. I really, really appreciate how you worked so hard to help women during COVID and beyond. What a crazy time. What a crazy part of your story. And also so exciting that it was such a positive part of your story. Oh. I really, really love what you're doing. I love that you're really emphasizing how individual the problem and the problem solution is. You're amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My honor, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That is it for now. If you're listening and loving what you hear, please like and subscribe. Reviews are great too and much appreciated. And if you're a woman in the middle who's 50 or over and an entrepreneur and would like to come on the show, please go to www.midlifeinterviews.com and fill out an application. We'd love to have you on to share your story. Thanks so much for listening. It is never too late for you to put yourself on your agenda. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you again soon. Now, real quick before we say goodbye, if you are connecting with this show, I'd love to invite you to a happiness breakthrough coaching session. It's my laser-focused coaching call that will help you get clear about what's getting in your way as a woman in the middle entrepreneur and confident about your next steps to more happiness in your next chapter. Head over to www.nextchapterbreakthrough.com. Talk to you soon.